Hello, my name is Justin McClure, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we return to Hong Kong to talk about director Soi Cheang.
1997 is commonly understood, I think, as a demarcation line in the history of Hong Kong cinema.
I mean, some people could say that, considering that's when the handover to mainland China happened.
That's right. And, you know, maybe the industry had been petering out a little bit before that, too, because of a variety of factors, from rampant piracy to intense competition from American blockbusters to an aging talent pool. But really, in the late 90s, you see some of the wind come
out of the sails.
Yeah, that's the metaphor I was looking for. Or the air out of the balloon or what have you.
Like Jackie's, coming to America. That's where his fortunes lie. And the movies will be just as good as they were back in Hong Kong.
And I'm often struck by, when you look at Hong Kong action movies from the 80s, there's this incredible energy, even in like the ones that aren't all that great. Mm-hmm. You just feel this sense,
a base like quality you will see in all of them.
Yeah, and there was just this spirit that was happening, on this island that was gone by the turn of the millennium. But there have been a few filmmakers since then who have forged a different kind of path. They've harnessed a different sort of energy. Johnny To, obviously the most celebrated one, who had a much more cool, temperature-wise kind of action movie. And then there's Soi Cheang,
where his movies, I think the best way to describe them are violent and more often than not tragic.
Yeah, he's somebody who has used Hong Kong as a landscape or as his canvas. God, I'm really mixing up all my metaphors today. His Hong Kong is captured between past and present. It's a Hong Kong where the shiny surface of modern day capitalism is plastered inelegantly over mounds and mounds and mounds of garbage.
It's a place where more often than not, his characters exist only to be set up and then be put through misery after misery after misery. Now, I will say that I became a Soi Cheang fan very early on, thanks to seeing his movie Love Battlefield, which, I mean, we'll talk about a little bit later after we get through his biography, but I was so taken aback by how kind of nihilistic the ending of the film was at a time where Hong Kong films were very poppy. It was the twins, which Soi Cheang directed a film starring some of them.
The twins, by the way, yeah, they were these pop stars.
Mm-hmm.
Who,
two young women. I don't even think they were related either. They just called them the twins.
And they were in the Twins Effect.
Featuring Jackie Chan.
Featuring Jackie Chan, yeah.
Where they fought vampires and things like that.
The early 2000s in Hong Kong cinema, pop cinema that is, you'll find a lot of canto pop stars.
Yeah, I mean, you would in the 90s and 80s too, but it was just different. It was shiny surfaces. It was more hollow and computer assisted. That was the thing is people, so many computer effects. Storm Riders comes out. We're all going to have these Centro Digital. And it's if you loved Hong Kong films and this is what's coming out as new stuff, you're I don't want this, but I'm still watching it like a loyal soldier. And then when I would see a Soi Cheang film, I'd be whoa, this is different than anything else coming out during this time.
And then another thing that happens around this time is because the Hong Kong film industry, once considered, the Hollywood of the East, that's what they would call it, because it was collapsing like this, what was booming in the early 2000s or the early to late 2000s was the mainland film industry. In China, they invested a lot into their film industry, a lot into their theaters.
At a time when, up until then, the kind of pop mainland Chinese cinema is not stuff that has lasted or that you see very often. It barely exists.
I mean,
to English audiences.
Well, and to be a little crude about it, a little simplistic, in the 20th century, when you think mainland blockbusters, you think The Storming of the Republic, or titles like that, just kind of bad historical epics.
Well, you think it's bad, not me. It perfectly represents my political stance.
And by the way, I recognize I'm grotesquely simplifying the proud history of Chinese cinema.
Man, at Hollywood Canteen, our favorite film-related bookstore, they have these 2 giant volumes of encyclopedias of mainland Chinese films that was probably published in the 80s or the 90s. And I flipped through them. I don't recognize any title in any of these, other than maybe the art house ones, like Zhang Yimou and The Generation.
Sure, Race the Red Lantern, that sort of thing. But in the 2000s, the Jet Li movie Hero is the quintessential example of, okay, we're going to invest a lot of money in this movie and create a distinctly Chinese political blockbuster that can compete with Hollywood.
But we're using the skills and talents of Hong Kong crew people like Ching Su Tung, who he made his bones in Hong Kong, or even Donnie Yen, for example.
So throughout the 2000s, you see this increasing investment in Hong Kong talent and the Hong Kong film industry from the mainland, which, I mean, the good that it brings is obvious. The bad that it brings is
the movies.
The movies. You're not getting, well, I was going to say you're not getting Sex and Zen anymore, but you are. There was that.
Sex and Zen 3D?
Yeah.
That was not a mainland Chinese production.
Well,
though.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like there was less, censorship was obviously stricter if it was a mainland co-production. So when you watch a Johnny To movie that's a mainland production, it's almost like the Five Obstructions. You're seeing like how we can adapt
his style to the rules that are imposed by Chinese censors.
Not like Hong Kong pop cinema in the 90s was political, especially.
No, not at all. But
it was,
there was no real limits you felt at what they were making. Also because they were doing it very quickly, putting it out quickly, and it was assumed not to have a very long shelf life.
So this is all a roundabout way of getting back to Soi Cheang. I mean, in the last few years, especially, he's been around for a while, but in the last few years, he's become not just hugely popular in Hong Kong, but kind of an international festival darling as well, for his ability, I think, to make movies that have a harder edge than you normally associate with modern Hong Kong film, but that also speak politically, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think the only way he's been able to do this is that, like, he served his time in the mainland Chinese blockbuster farms by making 3 Monkey King movies. Which, I mean...
Can you explain the Monkey King movies to
Yeah,
us?
they're big CGI blockbusters. So mainland China loves to make these like big fantasy epics. And the way I would describe them is very hollow. There's not really a sense of pace to them.
A great big eyesore. We go see these movies.
All the time.
God love you if you love these movies,
Yes.
but my God.
And they're just kind of formless things. I mean, even Rennie Harlin directed one. They got Rennie Harlin to come to mainland China to make one of these. I don't know how Soi Cheang made that first Monkey King movie. And this one came out, it starred Donnie Yen. It came out in 2014. But I was like tuned in enough to know that like it took years for it to come out. Like they announced it. It took years and years and years and years. Finally for it to come out. Huge hit. And I don't think it's the main source of why we have all these kind of, mainland CGI encrusted blockbusters. But I would say it's one of the kind of defining texts of that.
Now, before that, can you speak to his background a little bit? Because Soi Cheang, he was born in Macau and he rose the ranks in the Hong Kong film industry. He was an assistant to people like Ringo Lam, Andrew Lau, who made
Wong Jing.
Infernal Affairs. Wong Jing, the god, the king. Does that mean he directed Wong Jing's movies for him?
You know what? You said it. He even assisted on other young and upcoming filmmakers like Wilson Yip, who would go direct SPL. He was assistant director on Biozombie. I know you've seen that, right? One of the defining late 90s kind of horror Hong Kong movies.
And as a director, one of his, I think the sort of key breakthrough movie was a movie called Accident in the year 2009, which was made for Johnny To's production company, Milky Way.
Well, I think that you're jumping very far ahead because he cut his teeth in the trenches. So he made, according to Hong Kong Movie Database, 3 movies in 1 year, 1999, shot on mini DV. Now, these movies are out there. They're very hard to find. I found one behind a paywall and I was like, I don't think it's probably there if I do pay for it. But he considers his first film a picture called Diamond Hill, which I did watch, and it's very odd. It's mostly about incest.
Okay.
It's definitely in his style. It's a mixture of shot on film and shot on mini DV, and in that Dogma 9 to 5 style where they printed it to film. So just if you know what you're looking for, you're like, why does this look so weird? It's an interesting experiment. I don't think it works that well, but I believe that film proved that okay, this guy can handle feature films with a certain budget. So he became a hired gun for the early 2000s. He made the goofy film Horror Hotline, Big Head Monster. Some would say that his first kind of in his style film is New Blood from 2002. It's about people get blood transfusions and they're haunted by the person that the blood belonged to. But it's done in what, was the style at the time, that kind of Japanese horror style, but a very grim Soi Cheang version of that style that, like, knowing what he would go and do after that, it is instantly recognizable. But then you also have him directing films like Hidden Heroes, which is a Ronald Chang, Charlene Choi comedy that's kind of like Back to the Future meets the Terminator. And then you have like horror films like Home Sweet Home starring Shu Ki, which is again in that kind of Japanese by way of Hong Kong mold. And like, so I mentioned that I saw Love Battlefield in 2004 and I was like, all right, can't wait to see what this guy does. And I remember seeing at the Fantasia Film Festival his film Shamo from 2007. And this was an adaptation of a manga at the time I had never read. And it was a martial arts film. I was like, oh man, can't wait to see what the guy who did Love Battlefield and Dog Bite Dog was another big one. Did you not see Dog Bite Dog when it came out?
I did see Dog Bite Dog. Yeah, that was a Dragon Dynasty classic. Yeah.
And that's one that I feel like people that saw it probably weren't expecting what it was, because that is a miserable movie. That is not even really an action film. It's mostly like, it's almost like an Italian like gore film, just like people being killed left and right.
I mean, this is the thing that always kind of catches me off guard when I watch a Soi Cheang movie, especially, in his mature period. Yeah, you think these are going to be fun action movies, and they are, but there's
at a certain point.
But there's like a deep, I mean, they're always set in these like grimy, garbage-strewn environments, and there's a deep well of human suffering in them.
Yeah. So even Shamo, which is, it's a martial arts, it's a tournament film. It's so miserable, and you're like, oh my god.
And he's obsessed, frankly, with like the destruction of the human body.
He loves it. If he could end all of his movies with everyone dead at the end, like that would be his. He can't get enough of it. I was a fan enough that when that movie you mentioned, Accident, played at the Toronto International Film Festival, he signed my Dog Bite Dog copy because I brought the DVD, and I was like, I think he was surprised because it was at Scotiabank. At this point, like, you had to be a Hong Kong cinema fan to know who he was. But me and Christian Murdoch, the star of Teddy Bomb, we both had our Dragon Dynasty DVDs, and he was like, oh yeah, sure, no problem.
Oh, that's sweet.
And I remember seeing Accident and not liking it, maybe because it was exactly the kind of movie Soi Cheang would make. So you remember Accident, right?
Yeah,
what the premise is,
yeah.
which is a guy basically he's doing assassinations, but making it look like accident. An accident man, if you will, which would later be like a Scott Adkins film.
Like a Yahoo Serious, Mr. Accident.
And I don't want to spoil Accident, but it is a very kind of like nihilistic film where it ends up, where like a deflating film, if you will, for what at the beginning seems very Johnny To-esque, because he had worked a lot with Johnny To, he would continue to work with Johnny To, but then it kind of like pulls the rug out from under you and does an ending that like only a filmmaker like Soi Cheang could do, because any other studio would be like, that can't be the ending to your movie. Like, you can't leave the audience can't leave being like, yeah, that's it, right?
Well, I mean, the first time I'd seen some of his films not knowing who he was. Certainly had seen a lot of movies that he was involved in some capacity or other. But he first, frankly, entered my consciousness, appeared on my radar not until 2015 with SPL2, A Time for Consequences, a huge festival hit all around the world.
And we're skipping over Motorway, which we talked about in a previous episode.
And by the way, I'll just say about Motorway, I love Motorway.
Motorway, I mean, if you don't like Motorway, I think that's a movie. It's like, I don't think we like the same things.
No, seriously. And I just want to briefly mention Motorway a little bit. Like, the clever thing about that movie is it's a car chase movie, but in the most dense and compact city in the world.
It's not about going fast. That's not what the movie's about.
Yeah. So like one of the centerpiece scenes is this incredible like chase throughout a parking garage where just like every inch counts. Incredibly tense and exciting.
No other movie has ever done that. And like before, really, or since.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to compare to Walter Hill's The Driver. Has a similar style to that.
Yeah.
And so SPL2, I remember going to see it at TIFF and being like, it's SPL, so it was a huge hit. That's a Donnie Yen Sammo Hung film, directed by Wilson Yip.
That's right. That one came out in 2005, Donnie Yen Sammo Hung, and this movie came out 10 years later and has basically no relation to the first,
related.
Except that Wu Jing is in it.
Yes.
As a different character.
Yeah, because he was one of the sub-villains in SPL. Right. Here he's the lead of the film, basically.
Right. So it's a two-hander with Tony Jaa as a lowly Thai prison guard whose young daughter has leukemia, and Wu Jing as a Hong Kong cop who, because of his investigation, gets double-crossed, gets thrown into prison in Thailand under another identity, and the two of them eventually, once they figure out what's going on, they have to work together.
Yeah, well, one of the main plots is that Tony Jaw's daughter is sick and she needs like a very rare blood type, and he's trying to find the person who may have that blood type. And all this is interconnecting with also there is in the classic Soi Cheang, what is the grimmest thing that you could think of? An organ trafficking ring that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And this movie is like, it's not as pure and uncut as some of the later Soi Cheang movies.
No, like, or even Dog Bite Dog.
Yeah,
It's finding that balance of like, it's fun, it's also very violent.
Oh yeah.
And what I loved about the movie, I loved it so much, I saw it twice at TIFF.
Okay, so you said that when you first saw it, you thought, okay, this is good.
No, I loved it.
Okay, you did.
Yeah, because I saw it again at TIFF.
Right.
No,
okay.
you're thinking of somebody else that we know who saw it and said, that was okay. Someone who would have seen it before us, if you will.
Right. So, okay, because I remember watching this movie. I was at TIFF, watching this movie at midnight, and for a little while I was having that same response. But then eventually I thought, geez, this movie, I mean,
it's like, great, yeah.
It's like this movie is sneaking up on me. It's actually a movie that fires on all cylinders. The plot, the guy with the daughter with leukemia, the whole, like, it's quite intricate. The twisting and turning of all these, like,
I would say that like the twisting and turning is something that Soi Cheang loves to do. He loves to like present stuff out of order. I think that sometimes to his detriment.
Yes, I agree.
And even SPL 2 starts a little rough, where you're seeing a bunch of different like things, and you're like, how is this connected?
But
like,
SPL 2, like a lot of his movies, has this incredible momentum that just builds and builds and builds. SPL 2 has that centerpiece prison riot scene.
So good.
Is nuts.
Now, SPL 2 though, like you watch it and you go, wow, I'm not invested in a lot of martial arts films that I watch.
No, seriously.
Yes, but that's why like SPL 2 is so good, is that you're like, oh my God, I don't want the heroes to die here.
It sneaks up on you, and it's a rare martial arts film where you actually, you find yourself caring about the story. You find yourself caring about these characters and their plights. And because it's fun. And the characters are likable, but because it's undergirded with deep, like, reservoir of pain and suffering and evil, it has incredible stakes throughout.
Like, the villains are villainous in a way that you can go, oh yeah, there's people in real life who probably do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they can, justify whichever way they want. But then again, you also have the villain played by Zhang Jing, who's so cool in the movie. Like, every time he's on screen, I was like, I just want to watch this guy. And I want to watch him fight. He's an actor who's fascinating because, like, they tried to make him a star. They put him in, like, what is the, like, Sylvester Stallone break out of jail movie?
Oh, Escape Plan 2?
Escape Plan 3, I believe he's in. Yes. But it didn't quite click. But, like, you got Tony Jaa, you got Wu Jing, two different style of actors, but they're working so well together. And the film is about how they can't communicate because they both speak different languages.
Brilliant.
Yeah. It's just so good. And I have to say that I saw our pal Peter Kaplowski after the movie, and he was going to do a Q&A with Soi Cheang the next day. And I said, ask him, how hard was it to not kill all the characters at the end? And Peter said he did. And Soi Cheang went, it was so hard. I wanted to kill them all so badly. And I think that's one of the reasons the movie works so. Because if it did have a kind of bummer ending, I don't think it would be as strong as I find that it is.
I think so too. And I also think, like, hey, I like sad endings as much as the next guy.
Too.
But, sometimes a happy ending.
And it's kind of a fun twist on SPL, which does have a kind of bummer, like, everybody dies ending. And SPL 2 does some interesting moves there of, like, all right, it's almost aware of what came before and your expectations and twisting them in interesting ways. So, like I mentioned, between Motorway and SPL 2, he did make The Monkey King, and then he was in the Monkey King minds for a very long time. Monkey King 2, which I saw theatrically, and then Monkey King 3, which I watched recently for this episode. I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, I'm not shocked by it.
Justin, if Monkey King 4 comes out tomorrow and he's directing it.
No, absolutely.
No,
you're going to go?
I'll go.
I'll go with you.
But
you know what? The Monkey King movies, I can't see anything of him in them. Like, I'm like squinting, and I'm like, is there like any kind of like Soi Cheang? And he's involved. Like,
if he was here right now, that's what I would ask him.
Yeah, like what? I would love to just have a moment with him and be like, how do you approach these movies? Like, what are you looking? He's talked about in interviews being like, I don't want to make these movies anymore. Like, he's been very open about that.
But I mean, pretty clearly what's going on is it's a one for them, one for me situation. One of his obvious one for me's is 2021's Limbo, another movie that, it premiered at the Berlin Film Festival and got a lot of international attention.
Now, as Soi Cheang fan number one, I gotta say, I did not see it until this week.
Really?
I own the Blu-ray, the 4K released in North America. And I watched it and I went, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be.
Well, I mean, this movie is extraordinary in a lot of ways.
Yes.
I'll say off the top, I really didn't enjoy watching it very much.
No.
But I think I respect the hell out of it.
I know what it's doing.
It's extraordinary.
I can...
Every frame a painting.
This is a film of someone who had to spend like years in the Monkey King mines. This is what you make coming out of this.
And if we describe the plot, it's going to sound completely off the rack. There's a serial killer and people keep finding severed hands around Hong Kong. That's this serial killer's modus operandi. And there's a grizzled veteran cop. There's a younger cop who helps him out.
The younger cop played by Ang Lee's son, the director.
Who may be playing Bruce Lee in a biopic soon.
Oh, that's right. That's been threatened for years, right?
Yeah, well, it could happen. And then they have to work with this like street urchin, this young drug addicted woman who is responsible for the death of one of the cops' family. So that's the basic setup of the plot.
There's no mystery in this film either.
No, we find out who the killer is relatively early, and lots of twists and turns, very convoluted. He loves his convoluted plots in a way that I don't always
He
vibe
loves
with.
to show you things out of order, of being like, okay, now you're seeing this, but how did we get here? And then it's like, and not a literal zoom, but you're doing things that like, I don't know if they were constructed on a script level or it's something that he finds in the edit to make it more interesting for himself.
But the movie is shot in high contrast, digital, black and white. You see a lot of people comparing the movie actually to Hard to Be a God.
That's exactly what it looks like, yes.
And it is a similar... I don't want to say endurance test, but it's a similar
compared to Hard to Be a God.
Well, this is a more propulsive,
recognizable genre thing.
But also it's like it has that like Terry Gilliam quality of every frame is loaded with so much visual information that it can become like wading through the movie at some point, which I say with affection and respect because it's a movie that's like. Again, as in other movies, he uses Hong Kong as this canvas, and the movies are sort of meditations on Hong Kong. So in this beautiful black and white cinematography, you see like this electric grid-like city that's so ultra modern and beautiful.
But in you turn a corner in an alleyway and it's just trash as far as the eye can see.
Yeah, it's a beautiful modern city built on like entrails.
Like 90% of the movie is just in trash.
Yeah.
Like not even a joke. It's just like trash everywhere. Now,
so the parable of the movie, the metaphors are pretty obvious.
Now, I was even surprised that like most of the movie is watching the woman who was responsible during a drugged haze of killing. I believe he killed the main detective's daughter.
That's right.
And his wife was put in a coma.
That's right.
And it's just her being beaten up
over God.
And over and over again.
Yeah.
And like at a certain point I was like, was he just making like Passion of Joan of Arc, but like for this generation? Like that's what it almost feels like. You just close-ups of her like tear-stained face as like the lead of the film just like punches her in the face.
But I mean, I definitely appreciated this movie, and it's obviously very politically charged in the Hong Kong context, but I think you could also take this movie and apply it to any rapidly gentrifying modern international city. Like how it's a city that like the underbelly of the city is its digestive tract, basically.
What's fascinating about the film is that like what is the kind of conflict of the movie is the detritus of what the city does. It never deals with like, oh, you know, the upper echelons, which are causing this to happen. It's like the people that are drug addicts or it's, you know, immigrants in the city. Like that is technically the issues of the film. And it's like these characters are fighting against each other when that's not the people that you should be fighting against within all this trash.
Well, let's talk about his new one, which is in theaters right now, and which is, I think, as of this recording, the second biggest domestic release of all time in Hong Kong.
No way. Well, the Hong Kong records are broken all the time in Hong Kong.
It's just like here, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, wait, there's a new Hong Kong film in Cantonese? Yes, please. And then everybody comes out to go see it.
So Twilight of the Warriors Walled In, which is a movie that, again, has hit the zeitgeist in Hong Kong because of the way that it speaks to, you know, Hong Kong as it is right now and its relationship to its past.
Could it perhaps be a metaphor of some sort? The idea of there being a city within a city?
Well, what if I told you that the movie is set in the 1980s in the Kowloon walled city?
Okay, as a Chinese censor, I go, okay, it's set in the past. we're good now. It's not modern day.
And it also set in a sort of legal gray area. It was this enormous slum, and it was a real place located in this area somewhere between British-ruled Hong Kong and the mainland. So neither of those two bodies claimed jurisdiction over it. And the area itself, which was, I have some stats here, it was 2.6 hectares. It had 40,000 residents in it. And it was, of course, like loaded with crime and corruption of every kind. But also, like, there was a sort of society that functioned in it. Like, the garbage got taken out. Families lived there. It was this...
It wasn't like a lawless zone, if you will, of just pure chaos.
Well, it was this, like, self-running organism, which obviously had a lot of chaos in it, but nevertheless, it sort of made it work.
Now, will you be surprised to hear, like, many of the films that we've discussed on this podcast, it's about an immigrant to Hong Kong.
Right.
It's odd that, you know, a guy born in Macau, Soi Cheang, and who, by his own admission, like, grew up very poor, keeps returning to these subjects.
Right. So the main character, played by Raymond Lam, he's this poor newcomer to Hong Kong, and he's caught between a number of different factions in this lawless zone, the walled city. There's a powerful triad gang leader who operates on the outside, played by Sammo Hung. Within the walled city are a couple of different factions who are sort of battling for supremacy, notably Louis Koo, who sort of represents the forces of order and togetherness and communal living, you know, within the society. And like the Sammo Hung character represents like the forces of darkness.
And at the same time, it's about, you know, our protagonist meeting people, creating a kind of found family within this walled city, but then the past being the thing that's imposed upon them, that like things that they had no control over, people want revenge upon them for that.
Well, you can see why this movie, which is politically charged, but in a rather open-ended way, it can be interpreted a couple of different ways. Like Sammo Hung can be British Hong Kong, you know, he can be American capitalism. He can be all sorts of things. Louis Koo could very well represent the spirit of communism.
Yeah,
you know?
if you want to read it that way, you can read it that way. Now, is this another Soi Cheang film that sat? It was like 4 or 5 years, it felt like, since they started shooting. It feels like pre-pandemic they started shooting this movie.
Yeah.
But it's finally out, and I feel a lot of the times when these kind of like long, like delayed releases, it is censorship issues. As we discussed before, Johnny Toe says that the censorship office only works through written contact on paper.
Yeah, man, I don't know how it's able to even function, honestly, but somehow it does.
Yeah, and so like the movie, I think I like it. I want to love it though.
Well, I've been liking it more and more since I saw it because I was first...
I've seen it twice now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was a little taken aback when I first saw it by, again, how I don't want to oversell how grim it is, but like atmospherically, you spend a lot of time in these dark hallways and these like seedy apartments and such. Again, garbage everywhere, everything moist.
Yeah, everything is garbage in this movie.
And that's a lot to take. Also, the plot, a little convoluted.
Yes. So I'm with this movie right up until you get all the stories presented in the most convoluted fashion of all the like triad bosses and why they don't like each other and what's going on there.
It distracts a little bit from the immigrant story, right?
Yeah. And I can understand it's like the past coming to haunt the present, but by doing that, it takes away from the story of like this found family to when the end of the movie happened and it's like our hero is fighting with his pals. I was like, I wish we had spent more time with the pals so I knew them a little bit better.
That said, I say all this with respect because I really like this movie.
I mean, listen, Sammo's on screen.
So Sammo, who is cast very symbolically as like a representative of Hong Kong's past. And look, Sammo, he's an old man. He can't move like he used to.
Oh, man.
Think of the punishment his body's been through.
If he does like 3 moves on screen and you can see his face, I'm like, there, he did it.
Man, I like Sammo in movies these days so much more than Jackie because,
absolutely.
Because when Jackie's in movies, he wants to fool you. And Sammo has a very Steven Seagal-ish fight in this movie where it's obviously a lot of doubles.
Yeah,
that's
but
fine. That's fine.
He's so old.
I was moved by that anyway because like nobody's fooled and we're all just happy to see Sammo. And I think Sammo has figured out a way to make his older presence work for him in movies now.
And so like the movie is pure Soi Cheang. Like it doesn't feel like a Monkey King job for hire. Like there's the movie only he could make. It's based on a Hong Kong comic book, but it's so instilled with everything that's come before.
And like the other Soi Cheang movies we've talked about, it has this incredible sense of momentum that builds up throughout the second half, where like the final action scenes in this movie, which almost approach Kung Fu Hustle levels.
Yeah,
of,
absolutely. Of like goofiness of what's happening on screen.
But I don't know, it works.
No, but I agree. It works.
A very strange cocktail of, grim, almost like realistic aesthetics with the kind of like duty wire work.
Well, like the end of the movie has things happening that are just from 70s martial arts films.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, he has iron skin, we can't get through. It's kind of like sprinkling that goofiness throughout just to like allow you to reach this big bombastic climax.
And it sort of works as this melting pot, if you will, of Hong Kong cinema, and
I just wish, like, I watched the movie and I'm like, can you imagine though if it was like Sammo and then like Yung Bao and like other martial arts, like, because it's Sammo and the other triad heads. You have Sammo, the triad head. I wish all the other triad heads were also old martial artists.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Because it's like Louis Koo. He's not a martial artist. Like, that's not really his thing. But they still bring some weight to it in the roles. I like it, but I just, because I like SPL2 so much, and Soi Cheang, I love him as a director, I just wish it was just a little bit more. And you know what? I was reading an interview he did around Limbo, and he said, I just want to go back to Hong Kong. I just want to make as many action movies as I can because they're stopping making them, and let me just do it while I have the opportunity. And with the success of this one, I think they announced there's like 2 and 3 are coming out.
He wants to do a prequel. And I don't know, I'm very excited for what he does next.
Mm-hmm. He's been able to like walk that tightrope. Like, we didn't even mention Mad Fate, the Johnny To produced one that he did.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like Hong Kong directors now, or just, frankly, in terms of just directors now, somebody who has this incredible balance of, he's just somebody whose work fires on a lot of different available cylinders.
Yeah.
Like they're really stylish, they really move, and the metaphorical qualities of his stories are interesting and ambiguous enough to kind of linger in the imagination.
And so, like, if you weren't familiar with him before this podcast, add him to your list, because I feel like, unless it's another Monkey King film, it's like Monkey King 4, co-directing it with Choi Hark. And we want to do this. And they're smiling as they're looking at the camera.
Oh, by the way, SPL2 is known as Killzone 2 on these shores. So
that's right, because SPL1 was released as Killzone.
Yeah.
What a weird title.
Why did they bother?
I don't even know.
Yeah.
Keep him on your radar. I'm very excited to see what he does next. Probably another Walled City movie.
Yeah.
And I hope he even has more creative control in this next one to make it even a little bit more miserable. But still have that fun action present as well.
So do we have any letters?
We do have letters. As per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. And our first one is from Christopher Jones, and it's actually commenting on an episode a little while ago about Toronto Film Legends that we did, where we talked about all of our favorite film memories or big film icons.
People in the city
us.
of Toronto who had like zines and screening series and just guys who were around when we were younger.
And Christopher just wanted to add some of his favorites, like the TIFF library had a Laserdisc player, and they let you book time and schedule a movie to watch. Saw Night of the Hunter for the first time in glorious Laserdisc.
Nice.
Will, you mentioned Reel to Reel. I thought you were going to shout out the OGs of that show, Christopher Hurd and John Foote, who hosted before Pavir and Krause. It was bare bones at that point, just two knowledgeable film dudes sitting in a room talking about movies for an hour or so. A must watch for Toronto film nerds. That's probably before your time, right?
Yeah, I had no idea that there were hosts before Richard Krause and Jeff Pavir, but that's cool. Somebody released the archives.
Also, the Fantasia Fest at the Bloor Cinema. Fantasia Fest, a big Montreal film festival. It only lasted a couple of years in Toronto, but the letter writer mentions, to this day, I remember incredible screenings of Choi Hark's The Blade, Steve Wang's Drive, Clarence Fox's Naked Killer. Oh, the dream to be able to go see. And you know what? Maybe me and Will, if we were alive and at the perfect age for that, we skip them. We're like, we'll see that later.
Yeah.
Didn't even know what we had. He also mentions the Chinese video stores in Scarborough and Markham. Once I got a Laserdisc, these places were gold mines. This is where I got deep in HK movies. Now, this is something we haven't really talked about yet, but like Hong Kong movies for a lot of people, especially in North America, was a thing they discovered on Laserdisc, because there was a lot of Laserdiscs out there that you could find oftentimes for very cheap in like Chinatown stores.
I know that there are certain people that we follow on Twitter who have made a little cottage industry of like doing Laserdisc transfers of old Hong Kong Laserdisc from the 90s, and you can download them. I recently downloaded, somebody, if they're listening, thank you. Somebody put up a pan and scan Laserdisc rip of Fearless Hyena 2. Sort of starring
Pan and scan?
Sort of starring Jackie Chan, and they said something like, well, now you can see the movie, which is now in the Criterion Collection, the way it deserves to be seen.
I mean, Laserdiscs, a lot of the Hong Kong movies, that's the only place they still exist, which is a little bit depressing, but at least there was that. We threatened ages ago that I got a huge pile of Laserdiscs from someone, and I got myself a Laserdisc player, and me was like, we should just spend a day and just watch a bunch of Laserdiscs.
You have a Laserdisc player?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Let's do this soon.
I have some Chu Yang Ping films on Laserdisc.
Oh, fuck.
They're not good, though. They're not good.
Of course they're not good.
But we can whip it out, and maybe, I don't know, a Chinese Ghost Story 3? I think the Laserdisc was in that file, too.
Episode 400.
The Laserdisc episode.
Yeah, where we just watch a bunch of movies on Laserdisc and then...
That will not excite anyone.
Excites me.
I mean, it excites you, except for get that Laserdisc quality.
Episode 400, Chu Yan Ping.
Oh, maybe.
It's not bad.
Maybe. So thank you very much for the letter. I wish I could have been there to see all that great stuff. So our next letter is from Jesse, and he writes, hello, gents. I've been a proud Patreon supporter going on 7 years and an avid listener with a pristine, full gold Ninja video set. Wow, so he probably has every release then that we've put out.
Oh, man.
Wild.
That's your retirement fund right there.
And yet I've been hard-pressed to send in a letter. I never would have dared waste the time of media magnets such as yourselves. He just mentions that we brought him the world of Moturn Media. He's a big fan now. I never would have guessed I would have become so obsessed I'd make an annual pilgrimage for the extravaganza and film screenings that are put on. Now, this person doesn't mention it in the body of this letter. He is one of the main co-stars in Local Legends Bloodbath.
Oh,
he plays the fan.
Oh, well, sir,
role.
We're honored to have your letter. We're big fans.
Yeah, I love whenever there's like a new face in Moturn movies. I'm like, wow, who's that? And he plays the obsessive fan very
convincingly.
Yes, and very funny as well. And the letter continues, another thank you for everything you've done to highlight pre-code and Poverty Row cinema. You've turned me into a Bela Lugosi, Val Lewton, Helza Poppin, Frank Wisbar, Edgar G. Elmer, Robert Flory, Leo Gorcey, Bob Burns, Wheeler and Woosley, and so many countless others.
Oh my God. Now this guy.
Now, I love in that list of names, there was Bob Burns, the guy who's mostly famous for playing Gorilla Suit and being a fan of movies too.
That's true.
He's like a big collector as well. He mentions, I'm always in search for my next Poverty Row favorite. What are some of your underseen gems of that era?
So Poverty Row, folks, you remember, you've been listening to this podcast a lot. Poverty Row were the B-movie studios in the 30s and 40s in Hollywood who would make really cheap movies for the bottom half of double bills. Obviously, Edgar G. Elmer is the most famous filmmaker associated with them. I say obviously. I just say that for our fans. If you're somebody who's not listening to this podcast, you'll probably be like, "Who's Edgar G. Elmer?" But in this world, in this walled city of Kowloon that we have here with us, Edgar G. Elmer is a god and a star. So I'm not going to recommend an Edgar G. Elmer movie, but one that I really like is I Wouldn't Be in Your Shoes. A great crime movie from 1948 directed by one William Nye, who is not normally a director whose work is all that great, but this is a really sturdy, efficient thriller. I would also recommend, if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to make great claims for it, but Apology for Murder, which was the almost scene-for-scene ripoff of Double Indemnity, directed by our guy Sam Newfield. I mean, it's an entertaining movie. It has Anne Savage from Detour in it. And I don't know, I think you'll just have a good time watching the cheap hour-long Poverty Row version of Double Indemnity.
I would also recommend The Sin of Nora Moran.
Excellent.
That's an excellent movie. It was put out by Film Detective, now Film Masters. And is it considered Poverty Row? 1933?
I think it is. I see it associated with that. Yeah.
It's an indie drama, but it's so much more than that. And it has that kind of imaginative flair. You're always begging for a Poverty Row film to have, like, just give me a little bit of something.
Yeah.
And it's rarely there. But you'll find it in The Sins of Norma Moran.
Oh, I'll give you one more. Detective Kitty O'Day is pretty fun. It's a William Bodine joint. We love William Bodine here. A movie about a lady detective. Can you imagine such a thing? But a really fun, pacey movie that I think should have been a franchise.
Okay, so I hope you have some more that you can go from there, Jesse. And again, great role in Local Legends Bloodbath. So next up, I have one last letter to read. This is a very long one, but I think Will will enjoy this. So it goes, Dear Justin and Will, as a devoted listener of the Important Cinema Club, I wanted to take a moment to express my deep appreciation for the incredible work you both do. Your deep dives into the often overlooked corners of cinema has been a constant source of enjoyment.
God, we are good, aren't we?
And I can't tell you how much I value the passionate knowledge and excitement you bring to every episode. Sometimes it feels like the show was designed in a lab for me, and your enthusiasm for Jerry Lewis, Ed Wood, Edgar Gialmer, Leonard Maltin, and Sammy Petrillo has reignited my love for these folks. So the guy's going to go in a bit of backstory here. I think it's very important. If I told you this person's name, you will not know it. I can guarantee you've seen multiple things this person has done.
Okay.
Yeah. After film school, I moved to Los Angeles in the mid-90s, and listening to your show frequently transports me back to the early days working in what turned out to be the last gasp of direct-to-VHS exploitation cinema. I was an editor at Andrew Stevens' Royal Oaks Entertainment. Yes, that Andrew Stevens, star of Massacre at Central High, The Fury, and The Seduction. Andrew's company specialized in producing low-budget erotic thrillers, action movies, and kids' movies that crowded the shelves of video stores and late-night cable TV. Because I was new in town and worked cheap, I was able to jumpstart an editing career and got to edit lots of movies directed by Fred Olen Ray, Jim Wynorski, and wait for it, Gary Graver.
Ooh.
Fred Olen Ray was a devoted friend to Gary and made sure to get him work as a DP on his films. And sometimes Gary himself directed movies. I can't say that any of these pictures ended up being classics, but it was a real pleasure getting to know Gary when editing movies like The Escort and Bikini Traffic School. I don't think he had
Well, wait a minute. Angel Eyes was on the Sight and Sound top 10 list in 2022.
I don't think he had any personal investment in these things, but it kept him working and he could rent his equipment to the production. After the movies were edited, I don't even think he watched the final cut. Even though it didn't seem like his heart was really in it, he loved movies and the people who made them. He was always upbeat and wanted to stay in the game, even though there were fewer opportunities for someone like him in the 1990s. What made Gary truly unique was his enduring connection to Orson Welles, and he loved talking about the relationship. He talked about The Other Side of the Wind, a project that had consumed him much of their time together. I believe Gary had the dailies stored in his garage. I think that's confirmed, right? That Gary's the one who had them. A testament to his deep commitment to seeing the film to completion. He was passionate about the idea of one day finishing the movie, but sadly, he didn't live to see that dream realize. And Justin and Will, I know he would have loved your Blu-ray tribute to him.
Aw.
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah.
Living and working LA in the 1990s, every once in a while you'd find yourself in the presence of cult movie royalty. One day at the Royal Oaks, I saw Turhan Bey from The Mummy's Tomb sitting in the lobby waiting to audition for one of Fred Olen Ray's films. Another time, John Lazar, Z-Man from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, dropped by, having been cast as the villain in one of Fred's prison action pictures. One time, I was at a bar and found myself sitting next to Robert Quarry, who played Count Yorga in a couple of AIP pics. Another time, I was out for dinner at Musso and Frank's restaurant, and at the next table was Ann Savage from Detour, celebrating her birthday. The cake had
What is this, my dreamscape?
The cake had a photo of her from Detour, and she was having a great time. Oh, I could just imagine.
This is my Hollywood.
Famous Monsters of Filmland's Forrest J. Ackerman was also still around, and you could often spot him eating lunch at House of Pies in Los Feliz, near where he lived.
Wearing the Dracula cape, I hope.
He had sold his Acker mansion and was living in a small house nearby, and often I would walk by and see him through the window, sitting in an easy chair. I was also lucky enough to work with David Dakota as an editor on Leather Jacket Love Story.
Oh, what a great film.
Which you spoke about on your amazing episode about David Dakota. After a long day of editing, he said, "Hey, would you like to meet Curtis Harrington? I'm sure you know Curtis's work as the director of Night Tide, What's the Matter with Helen, and a slew of made-for-TV movies. We went for dinner at Musso and Frank's, of course, and he regaled us with stories he'd been dining out on years. My favorite was how he was casting killer bees and wanted Betty Davis to play the lead, but got a late-night phone call from her saying that she would literally die if she was stung by a bee because of her allergies. He ended up casting Gloria Swanson, who loved the bees and was able to commune with them effectively." Now, I haven't gotten to the part about this. I mean, what a life this guy's had.
I'm loving this.
But you're about to hear about something that was a defining thing, probably in your life, that you didn't even really think about who's the people who did it.
Okay.
Sorry for rambling on, but these were very exciting years that I didn't know about how much I'd come to treasure. Actually, I'm going to say, any listener to hear, I'm about to say what this person did, and you're going to be like, if you're our age, you're like, oh, I remember those. I have a feeling you would both appreciate this unique moment in Hollywood history. So, when the DVD format launched around 1998, I started a company to produce DVD extras and was able to channel my passion into cinema into something that not only celebrated the films themselves, but also the stories behind them. Producing featurettes and audio commentaries was truly exciting, but in those days, we really never knew who were watching them, or if the extras were making an impact we had hoped for. That's why it's so gratifying to hear both of you talk about what DVD extras meant to you when you're getting into movies into a serious way. This guy, he directed the William Castle documentary and every special feature you've ever seen. Spider-Man, Fargo, all the special features on the Martin Scorsese, like Raging Bull, to probably produce those commentaries. He did the Blue Velvet feature-length documentary that was on the DVD special edition.
Of course I saw all this.
You saw all of these.
Yeah.
Like all of the special features, especially, I think he worked for like MGM, you know, when they had the little lion logo.
Oh, do I remember?
He did I wonder if he did the Weird Al ones. Like I was looking at like hundreds and hundreds of credits of things he produced, edited, directed.
Oh my God.
I was like,
film school.
Like this guy, like all the special features, I'd be like, oh man, I can't wait to watch this. He was all involved with all of them. And the letter continues, knowing that this stuff resonated with you and helped deepen your appreciation for movies as a formative age means the world to me. It's a reminder that the work we did wasn't just about preserving history. It was about enhancing the viewing experience and connecting with audiences in a way that we couldn't measure at the time. Hearing your perspective has brought a new sense of fulfillment to those efforts, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. Well, I mean, Jeffrey, thank you.
Thank you.
Like,
Oh my God.
I wonder if I would love movies as much as I did if I didn't have that like entryway into like DVD special features. So like give me a little peek behind the curtain.
You know, probably not. Like hearing the audio commentaries, watching the documentaries. Yeah, like that's film school in a box.
And he says, if you ever found yourself in Los Angeles, I would also be happy to show you some cult cinema landmarks like Bela Lugosi's Last Apartment,
Yes.
Playboy Liquor, where Ed Wood shopped for cheap vodka,
Yes.
the Music Box Steps, or the Ennis House, the actual house on Haunted Hill.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you both for keeping the flame alive. Your work is a true labor of love, and I'm grateful for every episode. Keep up with the amazing work. And I'm looking forward to Shocktober. Warmest regards, Jeffrey.
Yeah, Playboy Liquor, where Ed Wood drank himself to death. That's Graceland for me.
Now, and he even included photos of himself hanging out with Gary Graver.
Oh my goodness.
Him with Gary Graver and Fred Olin Ray at a dinner.
Oh my God. What a letter. I forgot. I was so wrapped up in the special features, I forgot there was a whole Gary Graver part.
There's a guy. Jeffrey, you lived the dream.
Yeah. Do you want to be the third mic?
Thank you very much for a longer letter than I would usually read, but I think that it was worth it. So I mean, you did way more for us than we could ever do for you.
That's right.
But thanks very much for listening. So, I mean, there's nowhere to go but down from there. So,
Yeah. Well, hey.
I mean, speaking of what he just talked about, what are we doing on our Patreon this week?
On our Patreon, we're talking about another god, another man who existed in that sort of Fred Olin Ray, Gary Graver nexus. It's Jim Wynorski, director of such films as Munchie and Chopping Mall, and of course, The Witches of Brestwick. But we're talking about the great documentary from 2009, Papatopoulos, which is all about him filming The Witches of Brestwick, a movie that he shot in 3 days and that stars an actress you may have heard of called Stormy Daniels.
In her first
Mainstream?
non-hardcore, mainstream, non-pornographic role.
Right.
So you can listen to us to talk basically a retake on Jim Wynorski, who we short-shrifted many, many years ago.
And like I'd say, our overwhelming question is Jim Wynorski a good director? And the answer is more complicated than you may think.
Yep. And you can listen to that at patreon.com/The Important Cinema Club. Before we talk about what we're doing next week, we got to talk about another big event coming up.
Yeah, that's right. Well, folks, you know there's the Toronto International Film Festival. You know the Toronto International Film Festival has Midnight Madness. Well, what if the night before the festival,
The programmer of Midnight Madness,
Peter,
Kapowski,
who's been name dropped several times already.
Yeah.
Probably the most named person on this show.
Yes, probably.
Well, he has an event called Midnight Dankness, which is
he plays the movies he really wants to play.
And this is like the cool event. This is everybody in Toronto knows that this is so much more important than anything that happens at TIFF.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, right?
Because, you know, this year he's playing 3 feature films on 1 ticket. You get to see 3. One of them, Connor O'Malley. You've probably seen his YouTube videos.
Yeah.
He's very funny online.
Everyone likes Connor O'Malley.
Yeah, he has a new movie called Rap World, which is a film about, it's a mockumentary about a bunch of guys who want to record a rap album over one night. That's the whole plot of the film.
So that's pretty cool. But
Yeah.
but then what if I told you that it's being bookended by...
Yeah, we're getting people in was Conor O'Malley. Like, you know who that is.
Yeah.
Conor O'Malley's going to be there with the director of the film.
But then,
But what if the Beatles were playing too?
Right. For some listeners to our podcast, there's an even bigger star.
Yeah.
Matt Farley is coming to Toronto.
His first international appearance with one of his films.
That's right. So at 7:00, it's Local Legends, classic. Get to see it on the big screen. The greatest movie ever made about being an artist.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
Yeah. And then there's Rap World. And then after that, The Late Show is Local Legends Bloodbath.
It's world premiere.
That's right. The new sequel.
And could have just shown Local Legends Bloodbath. I think that entering people into the world of Matt Farley, seeing the first one and then Bloodbath.
It's important.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that context. But what a night this will be. Matt Farley's going to be there. He's flying down.
Yeah. So we're helping out with this event in some capacity. We're thanked on the event. I believe Farley may be staying at my apartment.
Yeah, we're helping. We'll probably be doing a Q&A for one of the movies.
Yeah.
So we'll be there. I mean, everyone who's important is going to be there. It's at the Royal Cinema, a huge cinema.
Yeah, and it's gonna be great. And if you're like, oh, I just want to get some sleep before TIFF. You're an idiot. I don't know how, or if you're like, oh well, the press screening of Beetlejuice 2's that night. It's like you're a double idiot. Like this is where you want to be.
Yeah, Beetlejuice 2 will be there for you tomorrow.
Yeah, fucking Beetlejuice 2. Give me a fucking break. Do you like movies or not?
And so
you can watch that shit on your phone. It'll be just as good.
And we're saying this now because we may not have to say it again because I think tickets, like last time,
they're selling fast.
There's like 80 left, I think, out of like 400 or something like that.
Yeah.
So pick them up now. I mean, if you're like a couple hours away, this is worth the drive-in.
Matt Farley's not coming to Canada that often, so
I mean, this is the only time.
Maybe never again. So. Yeah.
Even though Matt Farley has been jet-setting recently because he's going to be making an appearance at the sold-out
Chicago
Music Box screening of Don't Let the Rubies Get You.
That's right. This is really the year that Matt Farley breaks out.
All it takes is like one kind of indie producer in that Midnight Dankness audience who's visiting for TIFF to see these movies for the first time.
I mean, I just think like Matt Farley at this point as a filmmaker, obviously he's well known as a recording artist, but as a filmmaker,
I mean, yeah, he has an article in New York Times.
But like this is the year that the films are happening. And my prediction that they were going to be on the Criterion Channel within 5 years, I'm recalibrating that to 3 years.
3 years.
I think we can make it happen.
All right.
And then he's not going to be ours anymore.
Nope. Well, he's not ours anymore.
He's not ours anymore. But we
wrote the book on Matt Farley.
We wrote the book on him, and now we can let him fly free. We're going to have to find a new filmmaker to champion.
Matt Farley's like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, I have fans, but...
He and Charlie have never made a dime on these movies. No. Yeah.
Matt Farley's rolling up in his Rolls Royce and he's like dropping $1,000 tip to the person. That's not happening, but you want to be there. Like, I'm trying to think, what are some famous screenings of like, if I only had been there when like such and such happened.
Yeah, easy. The 1972 Venice Film Festival. They play city lights over the piazza. A lone light illuminates in a balcony.
Charlie
Chaplin comes out and he bows. He's in his 70s. Forget that night. This is going to kick that night's ass.
Yeah, what if Charlie Chaplin came up?
What's he ever done?
He did bits.
Yeah, exactly. What if it was Charlie Chaplin at the peak of his powers?
Exactly. So check that out. Midnight Dankness. What are we doing next week, Will?
Well, speaking of silent cinema, actually, we are going back. We were going back to silent cinema and talking about one of the great silent clowns. No, not Chaplin, not Keaton, not Harold Lloyd. I caught myself there.
Yeah, you almost said his name.
Because we're talking about Harry Langdon, who is a comedian who I'm actually...
Who?
I was going to say I'm actually not that familiar with him.
No, this is one
But who is?
Yeah, I saw a bunch of his shorts and I was like, I really like this guy. Let's do an episode on him, Will.
He's the baby-faced comedian. That's what I know about him. Again, didn't have much of a career after Sound came in. Frankly, I wish I could tell you more about him, but I'm really
excited to discover.
I'm really unfamiliar with Harry Langdon.
I've been finding we don't do enough silent stuff or like old timey stuff.
We should do a silent drama next,
like a filmmaker, like a Frank Borzage or something like that,
or even a Douglas Fairbanks, just something.
Like an actor, yeah,
or just anything that's not a comedian. But in the meantime, we're gonna do a comedian, and it's gonna be Harry Langdon. So we're gonna watch. I'm not even sure what the great ones are.
No, yeah, I don't even know what the great ones are.
We're gonna find out.
He's one of those filmography you're like, hundreds of films. Like,
most of them are shorts. I think I've got some DVDs like in a box somewhere. I'll pull it out. And
was he ever a public domain guy? Is there like a bunch of public domain? There are some
public domain ones. Yeah, I think pretty much anything in the silent era is public domain now.
So that's what we're going to be doing until then. And everyone who listens to the Soi Cheang episode, I expect you to tune in to the Harry Langdon one.
That's right.
So until next week, my name's Justin the Clue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening.
I want to talk about the book. Forget the book. The thing I'm most excited for the rest of the year.
So this has not been released yet, right?
No, it's coming out in September.
Are you getting your signed copy?
I ordered it. I ordered my signed copy. The new autobiography of Eric Roberts. I cannot wait. When it comes in my mailbox, it's like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm just going to consume this all in one sitting.
Now, has anything leaked? Any like salacious stories out of it?
I'm looking every day.
Okay.
Because Eric Roberts, first of all, yes, he's Julia Roberts' brother. He's Emma Roberts' father. He was also in the early 80s considered one of the best actors of his generation, or at least one of the most promising. Star 80, Runaway Train, Popo Greenwich Village. You know, he was there with Mickey Rourke in that contingent of young, methody, like the heirs to Robert De Niro kind of thing. Things obviously...
Alcoholism.
Yeah, drug addiction.
Yeah.
Erratic personal behavior. You know, things didn't quite work out for him in the 90s.
But he loves to work.
And so, but then his third act is the best of any actor.
I find Eric Roberts has one of the most fascinating careers I've ever seen because, like, you are the guy that voices the cat in a talking cat.
Yes.
You don't come, like... You don't then co-star in a Rihanna music video, or like show up in like big sitcoms.
He's in Righteous Gemstones.
Yeah,
you know,
he's in Babylon.
He is in Babylon. I mean, I went to see Babylon mostly for him.
Eric Roberts, yes.
So seeing him fill that 70mm frame, that was. But
like,
fun.
he's a guy that like, and who's supposedly very difficult to work with. Well,
probably not anymore.
To a certain extent, like that because of his alcoholism. Because people. I heard a story, a friend of mine told me.
Everybody has a friend of a friend who's worked with Eric Roberts.
Yeah, because he worked in Toronto on Suits, right? And there was a big like thing on set. It's like, do not give Eric Roberts alcohol. Like, do not do it.
Right.
And he left a note in the bathroom being like, I will pay you this much amount of money if you bring me alcohol.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope that's not true.
Well, it's probably true. I mean, if he's an alcoholic, like he struggles with that every day.
So if you look at his career and you read between the lines of what's happening, I mean, he said in interviews that basically he said to his wife, who is his manager, she said, what do you want in your career? And he said, I want to be on a movie set every day of the year. And she said, I can make that happen for you. And so he is in movies, like you say, ranging from Rihanna music videos to the biggest dog shit you've ever seen.
Oh, the worst.
Movies that are barely movies.
He has probably the most prolific IMDb if you see like what's coming next.
He makes
like
100 movies a year.
Yeah.
He works almost every day, usually on these amateur productions. And I like it, first of all, as a piece of sort of performance art where it's like, okay, mainstream Hollywood roles dried up for me. I still want to work. I'm going to work. I'm an actor. I work. So I like that. But also if you read between the lines, it's like, okay, this is like a recovering addict who like needs to
fill the time.
He needs to be busy.
Yeah.
So I respect that too. I would love it if, somehow he made a good movie again. Or
Me
like,
too.
Or like, wouldn't it be awesome if just out of nowhere
he just like stars in like a great movie.
And it's his The Wrestler, you know?
Yeah. I feel like he still has it in him.
I hope so, but I wonder have those muscles atrophied a little bit, because you see him in these movies now and he's fine. I like him when he's on the screen.
Who is he playing in Inherent Vice?
He plays like the guy who's been kidnapped.
Is that who? Yeah, so he's
guy.
barely in the movie at all.
Yeah, he's in one scene basically.
So people like clearly love Eric Roberts.
Yeah.
And
he's in The Dark Knight too.
But he's in there with every B movie actor in the world.
I think he's good in The Dark Knight too.
Yeah, he is. And Michael J. White faces off against Heath Ledger in that movie.
How come Nolan's never brought him back? Well, maybe he's hard to work with.
Nolan does have that, like, I want to cast like weird people in my, even like
William Devane is in multiple Nolan movies.
But even like Josh Hartnett, like that's a weird choice to appear in like my big film about the creator of the atomic bomb.
You're right.
Like Nolan loves that. I mean, I've said this before, but people who know Nolan is like, he goes and sees everything. Like he went to the theater to see Skinamarink. Like he sees everything in the theater.
Well, good for him.
That rules. But yeah, I'm looking at, like, you look at by popularity of Eric Roberts and it like starts to go down very quickly.
Well, what's too bad about the popularity rankings
is a little rolls.
Well, yeah, and like some of his best performances don't get watched that much anymore. Like It's My Party from the 90s, or well, frankly, even like who's watching Popo Greenwich Village anymore? No one.
Or even Runaway Train.
Yeah, which is too bad.
Oscar nominated.
Because Runaway Train rocks. Everyone should watch that.
I mean, okay, when you get this book, does it have, what's the release date of it?
Well, it's in September. I mean, he's going to tell a lot of stories about like being a young actor in New York.
Will it just like stop though when it gets good? Like when we want the good stuff?
Yeah, probably. Like what I want to hear is working with David Dakota. I mean, I also
Well, he doesn't remember the one afternoon he came in and recorded him into the mic for 40 minutes.
I also sue me. Okay, I like gossip. I want to hear about him and Julia.
He's got tons of gossip.
So like what's official about his relationship with Julia?
Not good.
Well, so like apparently they had some reconciliation in the 2000s.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Yeah, that's what's on the record. But also like, you know, they haven't been photographed together. It's like they don't seem that close or anything. So.
How is his relationship with Emma Roberts? Do you think?
I don't think good.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah.
Like, but hey, you know, maybe we'll find out more.
I'm sure we'll be like, I love them very much, and then not mention I haven't seen them in years.
I'm sure it's very diplomatic. I think she has said that she doesn't have much of a relationship with him. It's a Hollywood gossip corner here on the podcast. Mm-hmm. I'll be his son.
Do we have an
Eric? Do you want to be my dad?
Do we have an Eric Roberts episode in us once that book comes out?
I hope so.
Is there enough?
We may have just blown our wad on it, honestly. But
I'm like looking here. Oh yeah, King of the Gypsies. That was another one of his big roles.
There's a Western that he did in the year 2000 by the director of Body of Evidence, you know.
Yep.
Which he says is one of his best movies.
Oh, the Coca-Cola Kid was one that people don't like very much, but it was...
He was supposedly good in that. I'd like to say, okay, Purgatory from 1999 by Ulai Edel. So I saw an interview with Eric Roberts where he was asked to name like his best movies, and he said that was one of them. So I'd be very curious. Is this some termite art? Purgatory, starring Eric Roberts and Sam Shepard. I want listeners, go watch this movie and report back to me. Is it any good?
Interesting. Well, we'll be doing it on our Eric Roberts episode coming up whenever we receive that book.